Today, we are back in the world of church culture, and today we are talking about generational barriers. Let's talk about that. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us today on Let's Talk About That. And thankfully, we do not have video backup yet. I was over here jamming out.
You're not going to do that on the video? So
No promises.
It's just going to be like statue mode.
No promises.
Statue.
I'm too ADHD. I can't help but to move around and to jump around and to dance around. But oh well. They'll get back there one day.
I'm going to need to see that during Bible study on midweek.
I do. Just nobody else can see me, thankfully. Tell you what, though, I'll bring this computer out there and we'll have I'll bring out the Rodecaster.
There you go.
And then we'll have our clap button.
That's it.
I know when you said that, everybody's like, what button's he talking about? He got a little red button
That's it.
to get rid of us all?
Yeah. Little red button with a little red phone. Pick it up, call the White House.
Well, that's bad timing. Anyways. Well, all right. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for joining us, Pastor.
Thank you for the privilege.
We will get right into this shortly. I know everybody's excited about the favorite time of the week, and it's an odd episode.
Odd for God.
Odd for God. Oh my Lord. That's my new motto.
Odd for God. Put it on a shirt.
I saw a priest exercising at the gym. He was also doing CrossFit.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, it was terrible.
I thought you was going to say something like exercising a demon.
Exactly. It's a double pun, but yeah. What does a musician name his daughters?
I have no idea.
And a 1 and a 2.
Oh my goodness.
Where's it at?
That's great.
All right, this is the only other one I got. I once got blocked from somebody on social media for posting too many bird puns.
What?
Toucan play at that game.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's as good as it gets today.
Yeah, that was bad. That was terrible. Absolutely terrible. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. All right. Directly to our topic today, church culture. And we are talking about the generational barriers or the generational gaps, or however you want to phrase this.
You know, I had a lot of people tell me they were really enjoying the church culture series.
Woo! I've got several more, so we'll see when the tank runs dry.
I'm enjoying them too. Really, they're challenging me.
They're challenging me. I love them. I just hope they are blessing everybody else like they're blessing. They're not for anybody else. They're for me.
They're for me.
They're directly for you to talk to me. Oh, okay. So generational barriers. And the whole point behind this is to really look at that age gap and the generational gap between churches, between members of the churches. There's a lot of churches that are distinctly made up of elderly people. There's a lot of churches that are distinctly made up of middle-aged or even just younger people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different churches out there, and then there's some that are a good mixture of all of them.
So true.
So we'll be looking about that and trying to figure out, I don't know, you've talked about it a lot, how the older generations need to make sure to pass down that torch to the next generation because, matter of fact, I think you said it Sunday or over this weekend, where we don't need to let the next generation just start all over.
Yeah, absolutely.
They need to pick up where we leave off. It's not fair to them.
Yeah, why should they have to start where we started?
Exactly.
No, they should be building upon, the foundation that we lay.
I'm a big proponent of that. Like, why should somebody have to go back from scratch? I mean, sometimes you got to, but why should somebody have to restart back from scratch when they can just learn something so much quicker from somebody who's already been there? That's always my thinking and goal.
Absolutely.
To our first question, Are there any generational gaps or barriers in the church?
I think that there can be both gaps and barriers in every church. I do want to say the first thing on this is, are there any generational gaps? We have to be really careful not to fall into that trap of
That's
thinking
true.
that nobody wants what we have.
Mm.
When
Yes.
when the total opposite is true. When you say nobody wants what we have, nobody wants this
Gospel truth.
this gospel truth. When we say that, or if we say that, we are saying that nobody wants the greatest gift that has ever been given.
Mm.
So we have to be careful about that. It creates a mindset in us, and if it's said enough, it creates a culture inside the local congregation of nobody outside this building wants what we have. Therefore, everybody else is against us because we're doing what we're doing. There's no reaching, no discipleship because, hey, nobody else wants it. So even though it's not the truth, we cause ourselves to believe this lie that nobody wants it, and it creates a culture. So when I was taking a look at this question this afternoon, I thought, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna look at the demographics of our church, of this local church. So when I looked at it on Planning Center, I looked at all the people. It was so funny to me because, and I split it up this way on purpose. If we look at the 0 to 20, and then from 21 to 45,
Okay.
and then 46 plus, I split it up into 3 groups.
That makes sense.
That was just one of the ways that it was split up on there. They are within 5 or 6 of each other
Yeah.
as far as numbers of people in the local church.
Wow.
So overall,
That's amazing.
it was pretty even. Our biggest group, oddly enough, is ages 4 to 11. The
Wait.
biggest of any of the groups that it lists on there.
That is crazy.
57% of the people in our local church are males.
What
And
percentage?
57.
What?
43% are female.
What?
Yeah.
That's odd.
And a lot of that comes from that 0 to 20 because we have a lot of young men.
That is wild. Because even I can remember growing up in a lot of churches, home churches that I was at, even churches that we visited were majority female.
Yeah,
most of the
absolutely.
time, which is wild.
Yeah.
Wow. That's good to know.
Yeah, so so thank you for challenging me to take a look at that. And I often look at it and say, where's our biggest group? But it really, really challenged me to take a really detailed look at this and say, okay, what area do we need to be reaching? So it let me know that at the moment, there's a balance, but you can't focus. And I'll say this too. No church, I don't care how great they are, I don't care how financially stable they are, how many people they have, you're never going to be able to have a group or a focus group for everything that goes on in people's lives.
Oh, man.
And the challenge for some people, they say, well, I'm looking for this or I'm looking for that. And it can put a lot of pressure on the pastor, on the leadership team to create a group when you don't have the manpower to focus on that specific need.
See, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a big culture in a lot of more modern churches. I will say, especially ones that I've looked at that are larger.
Yeah.
They're groups, small groups, whatever the names are that they want to use. They
Sure.
literally have a small group for everything that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah. And I think that's good. I just think it's impossible to have one for
It's
everything.
hard.
And then it creates this, it creates a buffet style
Yeah.
church. It says, come and get this or that, and that's good. I think we should be ministering to the people's needs. I'm just saying to the pastors and leaders that you're kind of frustrated because you say we're not able to minister to all these needs. And you might have some people that come to you from, let's say, another apostolic church. They might come to you as a transfer, and then they might look and say, okay, well, that church over there can offer more. I'm going to go over there instead.
Oh,
They
wow.
might stay with you for a few months and then say, okay, well, you don't really have what I'm looking for. I'm going to go over here. Where new converts that you have made, disciples that you are making yourself, they tend not to do that because they stay where they've been planted. They stay where they were born.
That's good. That's real good.
They stay around home. So I really only find that culture inside people that have been in the church for a long time. All of a sudden, I don't like the way the grass is cut. I'm going to go over there where they, where they have they stripe their lawn, whatever, just something silly. But I think that the problem comes absolutely with generational gaps when we stop reaching for one of these generations. And some of the other questions are going to cover a lot of this. But when we stop reaching for one of the generations, and one of those barriers, I think, in the church is when an older generation says, well, the younger generation, they just don't have it and they're not interested in what we have. When the opposite is actually true. There's actually more of the young people that are living for God and doing in the kingdom than there are in the older generation. There's more and more. It's continually growing, but that's because there has been an extreme effort to reach that generation. There's been an extreme effort to reach the children and the youth. So there are more in that. But the danger comes when also not just an older generation that says the younger don't want it, but when a younger generation says, I don't want what the elders have, what they're handing out. I don't want to reach up and take their hand. I don't want to follow in their footsteps. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. And it could be because there are elders that are saying the younger are lazy. They don't want to follow in our footsteps. They don't want this gospel truth, so to speak. They don't want real Christianity. There could be a lot of barriers because of that. Instantly, when you say nobody wants what I have, you're instantly cutting yourself off from sharing what you have with the rest of the world because you're convinced that nobody wants what you have. So you have just stopped revival. So when the pastor says, okay, nobody in the younger generation, there's no teenager wants to live for God, nobody in that congregation is going to be reaching for teenagers.
No.
And so what's going to happen?
Sad.
Nobody's going to reach for teenagers, and there's going to be no teenagers.
Oh.
And they're going to say, oh, see, we were right.
Oh.
Really?
Oh.
Do we need to tell the hot dog story?
Yes. I guess you can literally make anything seem the way you want it to.
Absolutely.
Oh.
He had a hot dog stand.
Yes.
I've told that on here, haven't I?
I don't remember if you told it on here or not.
I've told it so many times. It's just so good. I don't even remember where I heard it. I think it was in one of Brother Stan Gleason's books.
Maybe.
So the story goes, he was a man owned a hot dog stand and everybody wanted to buy hot dogs from his hot dog stand. He's just booming. And he decides, I don't have enough capacity with this hot dog stand to feed all the people that want hot dogs. So he started a little storefront hot dog restaurant. People would come in off the street. He got so big that he began to hire help in the kitchen. He began to hire waitresses and waiters to help to serve food and clean up. He hired marketers to market his hot dogs, the best hot dogs in town, best hot dogs around. People drove for miles. Yes. Put signs out on the road, put signs out on the highway. People were just coming in, by the groves. And he's like, man, I never imagined my hot dog stand would turn into this. His educated son comes home from college and he says, Dad, what have you done? Don't you know that we're in a recession and nobody has money to spend on hot dogs? Nobody is eating out. Nobody's going to come and buy your hot dogs. And he's like, but son, I look at all this that's happening. He said, and we are booming. And he said, yeah, but that's about to change because we're going into a recession and people are going to stop buying. So the dad said, well, he's educated. I guess I need to prepare for this recession. So he takes down his signs and he says, if it's not on the billboard, I can save $850 a month right there by not advertising on the billboard. Instantly, sales dropped off. Well, he had to start letting waiters and waitresses go. Eventually, he had to let go all of his staff. People stopped coming. It was a few stragglers here and there. So he said, you know what? I'll just sell the restaurant and I'll go back to my hot dog stand. Oh. And so he sold the restaurant and went back to his hot dog stand and just, was just barely getting by selling hot dogs at the hot dog stand because his educated son came home and said, nobody's buying hot dogs. Even though while he was selling and had the restaurant, he was booming, but he let what somebody said that wasn't even true convince him to make steps, and it appeared as though nobody was buying hot dogs.
Such a good story.
So you don't reach a certain group, and then because you're not reaching that certain group, or you're not reaching out to that certain group, you're not meeting the needs of that certain group, well, then all of a sudden, you don't have that group, and all of a sudden you have convinced yourself that because they don't want it, that's why they're not here. When in reality, the reason they're not here is because you're not reaching for them.
Oh my goodness.
So it's a tragic thing, but it's a vicious cycle that we can get in. So we cannot allow ourselves. Now, we know that we're going to be rejected by some people.
True.
But we're not going to be rejected by everybody.
No,
hungry people, when presented with the gospel of Jesus Christ, they're going to come and dine.
Oh, yes,
when they are looking for something, they are going to come and dine. So if you stop reaching, obviously the church is going to stop growing. It's going to stop moving forward. So I think that there has been a generational gap in the church as a whole. If you look at it across the board, that age 50 to 70, there is a gap there in a lot of churches. What we would call middle age, maybe even 45 to 70, that middle age that is missing.
Oh man.
And a lot of reasons we could say about that. You've got grandparents and parents that came out of the Great Depression, and they had learned how to live with nothing. And then you had their kids and even some of their grandkids fall into that group, and they say, we don't want to live with nothing.
Yeah.
We don't want to barely scrape by. We don't want to be like that. And so they go overboard in the opposite direction. That's all they live for, is making money. All they live for is the career. And then they go in the polar opposite direction. They have some of the strongest family relationships came out of the Great Depression, because
True.
That's what people held on to. Spiritually, they had to hold on to God. Relationship-wise, they had to hold on to friends and family members in their household, because that's all they had. But then coming out of that, you had a generation that said, I don't want to do that. I don't want my kids to struggle like we struggled. I don't want my kids to wonder where food is coming from like that. So they went overboard in the opposite direction. Yeah. So they made the money. They became successful in the career, but failed in the home. The home became second place. Church or relationship with God became second place because of that. So it was a culture thing, and that kind of just goes into the next question. I'll say a little bit more about that when we get to it.
It does. It goes along with it so well. So we'll just go ahead. So why do you think that different generations experience church differently?
So I remember being a kid, and I can remember being in church services and thinking, this was my thought process. Now I say we have better church today than we've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
It just keeps getting better and better. Because when I was a kid, I can remember thinking, I wish the choir would sing this certain song so that
Yes.
we could have a worship service. Because if not, it was like everybody sits down and listens to a singer, and then if they do a good job, you clap. If they don't do a good job, there's like one or two clap because they feel sorry for them. And it was more entertainment than anything. Really good musicians, really good singers, we clap for. And every once in a while you'd get that individual that would get up and that it would move your soul, because you could tell that they were the Spirit was moving on them, and God was touching hearts, and anointing was flowing. So I remember thinking, somebody, because in those days we would people would write a song on a piece of paper and take it up to the pastor or somebody on the platform and say, here's a request for the choir. It's so foreign now thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's pretty comical. So I can remember thinking as a kid, 8, 9 years old, I'll let them sing this song, because every time they sing this song, it's always powerful, and the church moves into a time of worship. And now looking back on that, I'm like, that's so strange, because now every time we come into God's house, we know that we're coming here to worship.
Yeah.
And it's like we don't care what song we're singing, as long as you're pointing us to Jesus, we're going to be worshiping.
Again, it's just a big mentality of whatever you decide to make it is what it's going to be.
Absolutely.
And because I can be the same way. I remember the same way. I really hope so-and-so gets up here and sings such and such, because, the congregation's going to go, wow, people are going to start running on top of the pews.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we put such high expectations on certain individuals versus saying, it doesn't matter who sings what, why they sing, how they sing, we're here to worship God.
Yeah.
And we're here to experience what God's going to do regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think
total
culture
mindset.
and setting.
Yes.
Culture and setting. Different generations experience church differently. The trap another trap we can't fall into is thinking, well, it's not as good as it was as I remember it. I wish we could have church like we used to. So my question when people say that is, did you backslide? Because God hasn't changed. So why do you look at it now like it's not as good as it used to be?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that the longer you know him, or the longer you've been in that fellowship or that communion with him, that relationship with him, the more you should know about him.
Yes.
So the better it should be getting every single day. It gets sweeter as the days go by. It's not something.
Woo! Yes.
It didn't reach its pinnacle 15 years ago.
No.
It didn't reach its pinnacle the night I received the Holy Ghost.
No.
18, 19 years ago. No, it keeps getting
better and better.
Better and better.
Absolutely.
The more I know him. So I was thinking about this really, and I like a lot of the older early 1900 songs, even late 1800s. But one thing about those, a lot of those hymns are Depression era songs.
I was hoping you was going to go here, because I was going to bring up the difference in taste of music, if you want to.
Yeah,
say it
absolutely.
that way.
No, that's good.
Styles of music, representations of music from today till, even if we look back to when we were teenagers, the types of music from now to them were totally different, let alone now till the 80s and 90s. And I grew up just like you was just talking about. I grew up with good old Southern gospel hymns, and it has a dear part of my heart. I love it.
So looking at those, at some of those songs, some people say, well, I prefer the hymns. I prefer gospel. Everything should be gospel. I mean, that's what we're here for. But
yes, yeah.
So really, when you look at that, you have to ask yourself, where did this stuff come from? Because some people say I can't worship unless it's a hymn. Oh. But let's talk about where these things came from.
Yeah.
So the altar benches that we used to have in the church, well, that was started with the Catholic Church. The hymns were started by the Methodist Church. I mean, let's really talk about this stuff where it's rooted in,
Yeah.
So those depression. Let me just talk about this Depression era thing. I love those songs, but a lot of people have a hard time identifying with them because they've never been poor like they were during the Depression. They've never struggled like that, so they have a hard time grasping that concept. We think I'm poor, I don't have any money, yet at the end of the week the bills are paid. We say I don't have any money because I went to Starbucks 3 times every day this week. Depression era, poor was,
come on,
we literally have no money. We're living in a box on the street, eating 1 potato a day, trying to get by.
Oh man,
a piece of bread and a potato a day, trying to get by. So there's nothing wrong with these Depression era songs. It's just we struggle to make the connection. And a lot of the songs that came out of that era were I think it's called escapism.
Yes.
This world is not my home. Or when we all get to heaven.
Goodbye world, goodbye.
Goodbye world, goodbye. So it focused on escaping this world, and we do need to know that this world is not our home.
Yeah.
But what that did was it created a culture in the church that said all of our focus needs to be placed on heaven and no focus needs to be placed on earth.
Yeah.
And what that does is it causes us to be like the disciples when Jesus said, "Oh, I'm going away, but I'm going to come back." And what did they do? They kind of stuck their hands in their pockets and whistled a little tune, and they were like, "Oh yeah, he'll be back soon."
We gotta wait.
Yeah, and then the 2 men in white apparel show up, and they're like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, no, we're just sitting here waiting because he said he's coming back. And he's like, no. They said, no. He gave you a job to do. Go do your job.
Talk about a quick rebuke.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good.
Or what about, won't we have a time when we get over yonder?
Woo.
Well, what about
Now.
What about right now?
What about heaven on earth?
Yeah, that's exactly right. He said you are seated in heavenly places in Christ Jesus.
Mm.
But what that did was it did create that culture, and there has to be balance. So talking about culture and setting, wars, tragedy, sickness, disease, they all play a role in how we experience church. So you look at the songs that are written. Now, I will say this: my generation, they tend to lean more toward writing and singing songs that speak to Jesus rather than testifying of what he has done.
I can see that.
There's a lot of testimony songs in time past.
Yeah.
But my generation has a tendency to sing to Jesus, not just about him, but to him.
I want to sit at your feet.
Don't get me started. Ain't nobody sitting at nobody's feet, breathing on nobody. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I had to do that.
I'm coming back to the heart of worship.
Yes,
I think that was one of those.
I used to love that song.
Yeah, because it said, some of the songs, you have to sit back and listen to it, and it's somebody singing about their testimony. And that's great because we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. We need that. But the worship songs that lead us into worship, that lead us into that time, and maybe that's the difference in when I was a kid and now.
That's true. Yeah.
We sang songs about Jesus, and we didn't really sing songs to Jesus.
That's true.
You look at the Psalms. And I think that's the difference in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs that the New Testament talks about. There's a difference in those, and they're all needed. We need all of them. I'm not against any of them. I like any music that talks about Jesus I like the lyrics. When the lyrics talk about some of the songs that talk about Jesus, I can't understand. And I'm just not into that. But I think that there has to just be that recognition in the different cultures and the different generations. And says, hey, this is, we have the opportunity a lot, Sister Whitley and I, to go into different, even cultures in the United States. And we've been in the Navajo Nation and on the reservation, and we have been able to experience their culture there.
That's cool.
When they're singing, they're worshiping, different cultures and different people in different places. Even the different cities that we go to, it's like every congregation is different.
Yeah. And
you can see even the generations in these different congregations. So I think culture and setting really, really play a part into the generations experiencing church differently.
That's good. And I can even look back and think a little bit, maybe some of your older generation were not as, I don't know the word here, but they would not demonstrate their worship as
demonstrative.
Much. Yeah.
It's a funny word because it always sounds like demon,
Yeah. I was going to try to say it, and I was like, no, I'm going to mess that up. But, they wouldn't necessarily...
They weren't as expressive in their worship.
They wasn't expressive in their worship. And, maybe a lot of that come back from they got to be macho men,
Oh, yeah.
Versus, a lot of more modern people, if you want to say it that way, men, a lot more in touch with their emotions and feelings, so forth or whatever. But, they're not as afraid to worship or to cry or to, exalt God in whatever way they feel. There's a lot that can go on with your different generations, and especially how they were raised really rolls over into the church. But man, I tell you what, those people that were like that, when the Holy Ghost would get on them.
Yeah.
You ain't seen people worship until you've seen people like that.
Sure.
Because they're not afraid at that point to break the bonds of generational.
Well, when you know what he brought you out of.
Yes.
Jesus said about the woman that came in, he said, leave her alone. She loves me so much because she's been forgiven so much. And when people come out of a lifestyle where they were, bound, depressed, and oppressed, and just tied up and beat down, and they come out of that and receive the gift of the Holy Ghost, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's a weight lifted off of me, and it's like I can jump 10 feet high.
Yes.
It's like what do I give a God that can do that?
So good.
All I have to give him is my worship. All I have to give him is my life. So, yeah.
Anyways, Sorry,
That's
little detour there. But to the next question, are there any dangers in generations refusing to connect with some other generations? Maybe the older to the younger, or younger to older, vice versa.
Both ways. Judges 2:10, and also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers. And there arose another generation after them which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works. Okay, so
that's heartbreaking.
Let's break it down. Which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. There's both generations right there.
Yes.
One of the most tragic verses in all Scripture. How does that happen, that one generation knows not the Lord? Well, that can be a choice on behalf of that generation, but this was not a selective thing. This is not just one person out of the group. This was a whole generation.
Yes.
He said, they knew not the Lord. Okay, I get that. I get how one generation can miss it simply because they're wrapped up in something else.
Yes.
But how can one generation not know the Lord and not know the works that he had done for the previous generations?
Oh,
well, that's on behalf of both generations. There was a younger generation that decided not to know God personally, and then there was an older generation that decided, I'm not going to share what God has done. Obviously, the younger generation could not know the works of the Lord unless the older generation told them. Yeah. And the younger generation can't get a hold of this God thing unless they personally chose, we're going to get a hold of God. We're going to know him like our ancestors, like our mom and dad. The thing that made him the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, there was a moment in every one of those men's life where he was not their God. He was the God of their people, but he was not their God. Abraham's life, he had to have that God moment. He had to have that experience with God. Isaac had to have that experience with God. Jacob, I think it was, that moment he was on the run and he made that covenant with God. He said, if you'll keep me, he said, I'm coming back to Bethel, and this is where I'm going to build my house. I'm going to build my future here. If you'll just bring me back to this place. That night that he had that that vision of God when he was dreaming, he was fast asleep, and he sees the angels ascending and descending on the ladder, drew his gaze up to the top of that ladder, and God begins to speak to him. And it becomes the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because now Jacob has had that personal experience with God for himself. He's no longer the God of Abraham and Isaac. He has to become your God.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
He has to become.
So good. Now on to our final question. How can we break generational barriers in our churches?
You and I have talked about this before as far as this goes, but I had that moment maybe even over a year ago where I was preparing to preach. I was getting ready to come out. I was in the prayer room, and I felt pretty confident with what God had given me, that was right. But then God gave me a specific word in the prayer room for me.
That's so good.
And he said that the day is going to come when you stop seeing visions and you'll start dreaming.
Oh man.
And I was really preaching about, the next generation taking on, and not sitting back and thinking that you don't have a part in the kingdom, but realizing that your moment is not in the future, your moment is now.
Yeah.
And I wrestle with that quite often. Lord, when do I stop being a visionary? And I realized there were other things going on in that passage. But we're not talking about that now. We're talking about this.
Yes.
I said, Lord, when will that day be? Because I've got to have young men and young women coming up behind me that can be visionaries. He said, it shall come to pass twice in the word of God, in Joel 2 and Acts 2. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh. And your sons and daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams.
Oh, so good.
The dreamers have to keep dreaming, but there has to be a visionary that can come along, take that dream, and say, how can we make the dream come to pass? That's why I cannot emphasize enough to our older generation that we need them to keep dreaming. We don't need them to check out. There is no retirement in the kingdom. There's no time where they can just get off the bus and say, I'm just going to hang out and watch everything happen. No, there's no such thing. There is no retirement in the kingdom. When you stop being able to get a hold of the vision and really, put your shoulder to the work, at that point your responsibility is to dream the dreams and say, this is how you can carry it on.
Yes.
Let me give you the dream, and let me entrust a younger generation that can get a hold of this and get a vision to see it come to pass. One generation is going to have to dream while the next generation gets a hold of the dream and then gets that vision to see how, it can come to pass. There's got to be an older generation that says,
so good.
I see how we can have a successful hot dog restaurant.
Yes.
While the younger generation says, give us the dream, let us get a vision of how to make that happen.
Yeah.
Because we're full of energy, we're full of,
Strength.
physical power.
Yes.
We're able to do this, but we need you to share this dream with us so that we can envision how it can come to pass.
Oh, it's so good.
There's got to be that. It has to be intentional. You got to learn how to hold hands.
Yeah, 100%. Because I can remember growing up
with the next generation.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
Just go grab some random person's hand.
No, please don't. Do not grab my hand.
As you say, if they're introverted, that's going to end poorly.
Yeah.
But I can remember growing up, and I can remember the mentality of thinking, oh, the older generation that are teaching us how to worship, they've got this.
Yeah.
They need to be the ones to lead us and guide us. They got this. They're superheroes. I can look at one of my uncles that was my first pastor, and that's how I kind of thought of him, was like a superhero, because he could get up there and just preach and preach and preach and preach.
Yeah.
But, then at a certain point, you can look at it and you can realize there's got to be somebody else that can come along.
That's absolutely right.
Somebody with the strength, someone with the mobility, someone with, the fresh fire, the burden, can
absolutely
really pull along and take the wisdom from those older generations and say, look, you've been here, you've experienced it.
That's exactly
Show
right.
us what we can do. And, as we got older, now I can look back and say, yeah, I can see the criticalness of having to reach and push that, because I come from a church originally that there really wasn't any kids. There wasn't really any youth, even hardly.
Sure.
Mostly middle-aged to much older people, mostly older people, but
yeah.
But I can look back and I can see where younger people finally were able to come along, and they were able to get out and go knock doors with the older ones. They were able to, have longer prayer meetings.
Sure.
They were able to do things that, necessarily older ones couldn't. And, something like that always struck a key in my life that, you've got to have both.
Absolutely.
Or all, not just both. There's multiple generations there, but.
No, that's good. That's really good.
Is there anything else you'd like to leave us here with breaking those generational barriers?
No, I would just say, be intentional about it. Find somebody that you can pour your life into.
Yeah.
There's
vice versa to the younger. Find somebody that will and can pour into you.
Get a hold of an elder and say, pour into me. There's got to be less competing and more completing.
Oh my gosh.
There must be if it's going to continue. And it will.
Yeah.
But we have to be intentional.
It's so good. All right. Well, now on to the famous question. Any books, materials that you'd like to leave us with today?
I've got one that goes right along with, I think, what we've been talking about. Take Up the Mantle by Melanie Whitley.
I've heard of that person before. They're kind of famous.
Very famous. Famous in her family, too.
Yes. Oh, gosh. Yeah, so make sure you get a copy of that today.
Absolutely.
We might be able to even get you a signed copy.
I have the first copy.
See, now that's impressive.
I do.
Now you're boasting.
And it's signed. Nice little note. And if you're wondering what it says, it's none of your business.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you all for listening to us today. Thank you, Pastor, for joining us and pouring out your wisdom. So again, thank you all for listening to this. Thank you for being part of our podcast family. Thank you mostly for being part of the kingdom of God. So go out there, teach some Bible studies, and reach the lost. God bless you.